Hello, welcome to my channel, Save Infinity. In this video, I just wanted to talk about the idea of like spiritual warfare and the whole two sides, one coin aspect of, source and light and dark and all that sort of yin-yangness. And how, the whole spiritual warfare aspect in this sort of reality is almost like, method acting gone too far on, the theatrical stage of Source. As they often say, that this life is like a stage or, like a play performance. And we're all kind of, characters playing a role in that aspect that we've just, got amnesia about or what have you. And it's kind of, funny when you think about it from that aspect, from a real zoomed out aspect of, two sides, one coin, and everything is source energy at the end of the day, because that's all there literally is in existence. Just funneled and fractaled down into different forms and experiences. And so, this whole idea of like a light versus dark, or this, big battle or what have you. And it's like, then when you really zoom out and look at it, it's like the tentacles of Source are, on within the players on each side, just kind of playing each side like a little puppet, and it's really all just like one energetic being kind of, playing a little game of spiritual warfare with itself. It's so easy, obviously, once we're, in it, to get so caught up in those sort of aspects and to take it all like super, super seriously in that aspect. But kind of, forgetting at the end of the day that from that zoomed out perspective, it is all us. It is all that, one energy, one consciousness. It's really, behind everything. Kind of like there's, a grand script for it all that's been ripped in half, and one side has one side of the plan and the other side has the other side of the plan. And, we've each got, our little plans, and we're, following our script along, thinking, we're making all these, individual little efforts and actions toward this sort of more sort of spiritual warfare, light versus dark type engagement in that aspect. But then really at the top of it all, Source is just kind of sitting there having written the whole script all together. It's all part of the way of how it makes this life experience such an immersive experience in the way that it does feel and play out and everything. If we did have the whole entire script or the whole entire plan, then we really wouldn't get this sort of way of being able to interact and engage with each other in such, an immersive duality type realm. But it can just, help at times when things do get like, a little too serious or a little too heavy or what have you, to really, take away some of that fear or stress aspects, just kind of remembering that, underneath everything, it is, just source energy, and kind of, I like to think of it from that aspect of, the big energetic entire, oneness, sourceness of everything, being this big being, and just has, a little tentacle in everything and everyone, kind of like, little finger puppets, wear like the costumes that this individual tentacle's wearing, but at the end of the day it's all still just one being kind of interacting with itself, in a way that has gone a little out of control in some aspects, that often instead of enjoying the experience, we're kind of just hurting each other, which in turn is just hurting ourselves, because we all are one. But still can be helpful to just kind of, remember and perceive things from that kind of aspect of how, we are all that oneness, one energy, one being in that aspect, that real zoomed out perspective. But we kind of come through and have this experience the way it is because, if we all remembered completely that whole oneness aspect, it would literally just feel like having conversations with yourself, right? Rather than the sort of illusion of separation type experience we have at the moment, where it feels like we get to, you know, engage with each other in that sort of unique individual way. You know, and kind of in that aspect as well of, if we didn't have, you know, the sort of free will type vibe that we have here, you know, it would be easier for Source to just, you know, kind of puppet our little character through this perfect little pathway of experience and what have you. But then we wouldn't get, you know, that free will experience of making our own sort of choices and decisions, and, you know, having, you know, lessons of growth and what have you along the way. It would just all be this perfectly seamless ride that we kind of just get taken along on. Whereas this way it has that more of a, you know, we're kind of having that free will to have an individual type adventure where we kind of choose our actions and steps to try to get to the pathway we want to go on. But then, you know, as that can be, you know, a little harder to get used to and to learn how to navigate and do such things, you can kind of think of as well, then sometimes Source as well, you know, will kind of influence other little puppet characters, if you will, with you know, with their little tentacle, to kind of maybe do or say things that, you know, aren't so great or feel so great in the moment, but might be helping you kind of steer you back more onto the more beneficial path that you should be on, but that your own sort of, you know, amnesia and combination of free will has kind of steered you away from. But because you do still have that free will aspect, you know, Source may not be able to exactly like swing, you know, use their tentacle to swing you right back on the path. So instead sometimes uses, you know, other circumstances in this, you know, theatrical performance to kind of, you know, improv you back into another scene that's more beneficial for you, or to, you know, help expand your consciousness or mind or awareness or what have you, or perception to, you know, certain things that will then, you know, assist you moving forward in a much more beneficial and greater aspect. You know, kind of like an analogy I've used before of like a pinball machine, how you have like the two little levers on each side, like dum 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 dumming. And if you just had one going right, it might be a bit harder to kind of whack you onto the right path. It might just keep having you swinging up one side. Whereas if you kind of have that light and dark little, you know, paddle going, it's kind of easier to then swift and change and kind of navigate you into a more directed path and outcome. And, you know, kind of like we are all going up these different, you know, individual and unique paths and journeys to eventually, you know, at the end, you know, go home, as we say. You know, we're all here kind of walking each other home, back to Source, back to heaven. And, you know, at the end, our little pinball, you know, goes into the hole for, you know, like a goal or a home run through back to wholeness in that aspect. So kind of like we're being bumped and weaved by the bumpers of the light and dark aspects to kind of swing us through our journey to eventually make it back home in that little hole. Alright, well, I might leave this one here for now. Sending you so much peace, love, light and blessings as always.